Two little boys sat on the fence whittling arrows one fine day. Said one little boy to the other little boy, "Let's do something jolly." "All right, what will we do?" "Run off to the woods and be hunters." "What can we hunt?" "Bears and foxes." "Mullen says there ain't any round here." "Well, we can shoot squirrels and snare woodchucks." "Haven't got any guns and trap." "We've got our bows, and I found an old trap behind the barn." "What will we eat?" "Here's our lunch, and when that's gone we can roast the squirrels and cook the fish on a stick. I know how." "Where will you get the fire?" "Got matches in my pocket." "I've got a lot of things we could use." "Let's see." And as if satisfied at last, cautious Billy displayed his treasures, while bold Tommy did the same. Besides the two knives there were strings, nails, matches, a piece of putty, fishhooks, and two very dirty handkerchiefs. "There, sir, that's a first-rate fit-out for hunters, and with the jolly basket of lunch Mrs. Mullen gave us, we can get on tip-top for 2 or 3 days," said Tommy, eager to be off. "Where shall we sleep?" asked Billy, who liked to be comfortable both night and day. "Oh, up in trees or on beds of leaves like the fellows in our books. If you are afraid, stay at home. I'm going to have no end of a good time." And Tommy crammed the things back into his pockets as if there were no time to lose. "Poof, I ain't afraid. Come on." And jumping down, Billy caught up his rod, rather ashamed of his many questions. No one was looking at them, and they might have walked quietly off, but that the running away might be all right, both raced down the road, tumbled over a wall, and dashed into the woods as if a whole tribe of wild Indians were after them. "Do you know the way?" panted Billy, when at last they stopped for breath. "Yes, it winds right up the mountain, but we'd better not keep to it, or someone will see us and take us back. We're going to be real hunters and have adventures, so we must get lost and find our way by the sun and the stars," answered Tommy, who had read so many boys' books his little head was a jumble of Texan Rangers, African explorers, and Buffalo Bills, and he burned to outdo them all. "What will our mothers say if we get really lost?" asked Billy, always ready with a question. "Mine won't fuss. She lets me do what I like." That was true, for Tommy's poor mamma was tired of trying to keep the lively little fellow in order, and had got used to seeing him come out of all his scrapes without much harm. "Mine will be scared. She's always afraid I'm going to get hurt, so I'm careful. But I guess I'll risk it and have some fun to tell about when we go home," said Billy, trudging after Captain Tommy, who always took the lead. These 11-year-old boys were staying with their mothers at a farmhouse up among the mountains, and having got tired of the tame bears, the big barn, the trout brook, and the 30 colts at pasture, and the society of the few little girls and younger boys at the hotel nearby, these fine fellows longed to break loose and rough it in the bush, as the hunters did in their favourite stories. Away they went, deeper and deeper into the great forest that covered the side of the mountain. A pleasant place that August day, for it was cool and green, with many brooks splashing over the rocks or lying in brown pools under the ferns. Squirrels chattered and raced in the tall pines. Now and then a grey rabbit skipped out of sight among the brakes, or a strange bird flew by. Here and there blackberries grew in the open places, sassafras bushes were plentiful, and black birch bark was ready for chewing. "Don't you call this nice?" asked Tommy, pausing at last in a little dell, where a noisy brook came tumbling down the mountainside and the pines sung overhead. "Yes, but I'm awful hungry. Let's rest and eat our lunch," said Billy, sitting down on a cushion of moss. "You always want to be stuffing and resting," answered sturdy Tommy, who liked to be moving all the time. He took the fishing basket which hung over his shoulder by a strap and opened it carefully, for good Mrs. Mullen had packed a nice lunch of bread and butter, cake and peaches, with a bottle of milk, and 2 large pickles slipped in on the sly to please the boys. Tommy's face grew very sober as he looked in, for all he saw was a box of worms for bait and an old jacket. "By George, we've got the wrong basket. This is Mullen's, and he's gone off with our prog. Won't he be mad?" "Not as mad as I am. Why didn't you look? You're always in such a hurry to start. What shall we do now without anything to eat?" whined Billy, for losing his lunch was a dreadful blow to him. "We shall have to catch some fish and eat blackberries. Which will you do, old crybaby?" said Tommy, laughing at the other boy's dismal face. "I'll fish. I'm so tired I can't go scratching round after berries. I don't love 'em either." And Billy began to fix his line and bait his hook. "Lucky we got the worms. You can eat 'em if you can't wait for fish," said Tommy, bustling about to empty the basket and pile up their few possessions in a heap. "There's a quiet pool down here. You go fish there. I'll pick the berries and then show you how to get dinner in the woods. This is our camp, so fly around and do your best." Then Tommy ran off to a place nearby where he'd seen the berries, while Billy found a comfortable nook by the pool and sat scowling at the water so crossly it was a wonder any trout came to his hook. But the fat worms tempted several small ones, and he cheered up at the prospect of food. Tommy whistled while he picked, and in half an hour came back with 2 quarts of nice berries and an armful of dry sticks for the fire. "We'll have a jolly dinner after all," he said, as the flames went crackling up and the dry leaves made a pleasant smell. "Got 4, but don't see how we'll ever cook 'em. No frying pan," grumbled Billy, throwing down the 4 little trout which he had half cleaned. "Don't want any. Broil 'em on the coals or toast 'em on a fork and stick. I'll show you how," said cheerful Tommy, whittling away and feeding his fire as much like a real hunter as a small boy could be. While he worked, Billy ate berries and sighed for bread and butter. At last, after much trouble, 2 of the trout were half-cooked and eagerly eaten by the hungry boys. But they were very different from the nice brown ones Mrs. Mullen gave them, for in spite of Tommy's struggles, they would fall in the ashes, and there was no salt to eat them with. By the time the last were toasted, the young hunters were so hungry they could have eaten anything, and not a berry was left. "I set the trap down there, for I saw a hole among the vines, and I shouldn't wonder if we got a rabbit or something," said Tommy when the last bone was polished. "You go and catch some more fish, and I'll see if I've caught any old chap as he went home to dinner." Off ran Tommy, and the other boy went slowly back to the brook, wishing with all his might he was at home eating sweet corn and berry pie. The trout had evidently gone to their dinners, for not one bite did poor Billy get, and he was just falling asleep when a loud shout gave him such a fright that he tumbled into the brook up to his knees. "I got him! Come and see! He's a bouncer!" roared Tommy from the berry bushes some way off. Billy scrambled out and went as far as his wet boots would let him to see what the prize was. He found Tommy dancing wildly round a fat grey animal who was fighting to get his paws out of the trap and making a queer noise as he struggled about. "What is it?" asked Billy, getting behind a tree as fast as possible, for the thing looked fierce and he was very timid. "A raccoon, I guess, or a big woodchuck. Won't his fur make a fine cap? I guess the other fellows will wish they'd come with us," said Tommy, prancing to and fro without the least idea what to do with the creature. "He'll bite. We'd better run away and wait till he's dead," said Billy. "I wish he'd got his head in, and I could carry him off, but he does look savage, so we'll have to leave him a while and get him when we come back. But he's a real beauty," said Tommy, looking proudly at the bunch of grey fur scuffling in the sand. "Can we ever eat him?" asked hungry Billy, ready for a fried crocodile if he could get it. "If he's a raccoon, we can, but I don't know about woodchucks. The fellows in my books don't seem to have caught any. He's nice and fat. We might try him when he's dead. said Tommy, who cared more for the skin to show than the best meal ever cooked. The sound of a gun echoing through the wood gave Tommy a good idea. "Let's find the man and get him to shoot this chap. Then we needn't wait, but skin him right away and eat him too." Off they went to the camp, and catching up their things, the two hunters hurried away in the direction of the sound, feeling glad to know that someone was near them, for 2 or 3 hours of wood life made them a little homesick. They ran and scrambled and listened and called, but not until they'd gone a long way up the mountain did they find the man, resting in an old hut left by the lumberman. The remains of his dinner were spread on the floor, and he lay smoking and reading a newspaper while his dog dozed at his feet, close to a well-filled game bag. He looked surprised when 2 dirty, wet little boys suddenly appeared before him, one grinning cheerfully, the other looking very dismal and scared as the dog growled and glared at them as if they were 2 rabbits. "Hullo," said the man. "Hello," answered Tommy. "Who are you?" asked the man. "Hunters," said Tommy. "Had good luck?" And the man laughed. "First rate. Got a raccoon in our trap, and we want you to come and shoot him," answered Tommy proudly. "Sure?" said the man, looking interested as well as amused. "No, but I think so." "What's he like?" Tommy described him and was much disappointed when the man lay down again, saying with another laugh, "It's a woodchuck. He's no good." "But I want the skin." "Then don't shoot him. Let him die. That's better for the skin," said the man, who was tired and didn't want to stop for such poor game. All this time Billy had been staring hard at the sandwiches and bread and cheese on the floor and sniffing at them as the dog sniffed at him. "Want some grub?" asked the man, seeing the hungry look. "I just do. We left our lunch and I've only had 2 little trout and some old berries since breakfast," answered Billy, with tears in his eyes and a hand on his stomach. "Eat away then. I'm done and don't want the stuff." And the man took up his paper as if glad to be let alone. It was lucky that the dog had been fed, for in 10 minutes nothing was left but the napkin, and the boys sat picking up the crumbs, much refreshed, but ready for more. "Better be going home, my lads. It's pretty cold on the mountain after sunset, and you are a long way from town," said the man, who had peeped at them over his paper now and then, and saw, in spite of the dirt and rips, that they were not farmer boys. "We don't live in town. We're at Mullins in the valley. No hurry, we know the way, and we want to have some sport first. You seem to have done well," answered Tommy, looking enviously from the gun to the game bag, out of which hung a rabbit's head and a squirrel's tail. "Pretty fair, but I want a shot at the bear. People tell me there is one up here, and I'm after him, for he kills the sheep and might hurt some of the young folks round here," said the man, loading his gun with a very sober air, for he wanted to get rid of the boys and send them home. Billy looked alarmed, but Tommy's brown face beamed with joy as he said eagerly, "I hope you'll get him. I'd rather shoot a bear than any other animal but a lion. We don't have those here, and bears are scarce. Cullen said he hadn't heard of one for a long time, so this must be a young one, for they killed the big one 2 years ago." That was true, and the man knew it. He did not really expect or want to meet a bear, but thought the idea of one would send the little fellows home at once. Finding one of them was unscared, he laughed and said with a nod to Tommy, "If I had time, I'd take you along and show you how to hunt. But this fat friend of yours couldn't rough it with us, and we can't leave him alone, so go ahead your own way. Only I wouldn't climb any higher, for among the rocks you're sure to get hurt or lost." "Oh, I say, let's go. Such fun, Billy. I know you'll like it. A real gun and dog and hunter. Come on, and don't be a mollycoddle," cried Tommy, wild to go. "I won't. I'm tired and I'm going home. You can go after your old bears if you want to. I don't think much of hunting anyway, and I wish I hadn't come," growled Billy, very cross at being left out, yet with no desire to scramble any more. "Can't stop. Goodbye. Get along home, and some day I'll come and take you out with me, little leather stocking," said the man, striding off with the deer gun and dog and bag, leaving Billy to wonder what he meant by that queer name, and Tommy to console himself with the promise made him. "Let's go and see how old Chucky gets on," he said good-naturedly when the man vanished. "Not till I'm rested. I can get a good nap on this pile of hay, then we'll go home before it's late," answered lazy Billy, settling himself on the rough bed the lumberman had used. "I just wish I had a boy with some go in him. You ain't much better than a girl," sighed Tommy, walking off to a pine tree where some squirrels seemed to be having a party. They chattered and raced up and down at such a rate. He tried his bow and shot all his arrows many times in vain, for the lively creatures gave him no chance. He'd better luck with a brown bird who sat in a bush and was hit full in the breast with the sharpest arrow. Poor thing fluttered and fell, and its blood wet the green leaves as it lay dying on the grass. Tommy was much pleased at first, but as he stood watching its bright eye grow dim and its pretty brown wings stop fluttering, he felt sorry that its happy little life was so cruelly ended, and ashamed that his thoughtless fun had given so much pain. "I'll never shoot another bird except hawks after chickens, and I won't brag about this one. It was so tame and trusted me. I was very mean to kill it." As he thought this, Tommy smoothed the ruffled feathers of the dead thrush, and making a little grave under the pine, buried it wrapped in green leaves and left it there where its mate could sing over it and no rude hands disturb its rest. "I'll tell Mama, and she will understand, but I won't tell Billy. He's such a greedy old chap, he'll say I ought to have kept the poor bird to eat," thought Tommy as he went back to the hut and sat there restringing his bow till Billy woke up much more amiable for his sleep. They tried to find the woodchuck but lost their way, and wandered deeper into the great forest till they came to a rocky place and could go no further. They climbed up and tumbled down, turned back and went round, looked at the sun and knew it was late, chewed sassafras bark and checkerberry leaves for supper, and grew more and more worried and tired as hour after hour went by, and they saw no end to woods and rocks. Once or twice they heard the hunter's gun far away and called and tried to find him. Tommy scolded Billy for not going with the man who knew his way and was probably safe in the valley when the last faint shot came up to them. Billy cried and reproached Tommy for proposing to run away, and both felt very homesick for their mothers and their good safe beds at Farmer Mullen's. The sun set and found them in a dreary place full of rocks and blasted trees halfway up the mountain. They were so tired they could hardly walk, and longed to lie down anywhere to sleep, but remembering the hunter's story of the bear, they were afraid to do it, till Tommy suggested climbing a tree after making a fire at the foot of it to scare away the bear lest he climb too and get them. But alas, the matches were left in their first camp, so they decided to take turns to sleep and watch, since it was plain that they must spend the night there. Billy went up first, and creeping into a good notch of the bare tree, tried to sleep, while brave Tommy, armed with a big stick, marched to and fro below. Every few minutes a trembling voice would call from above, "Is anything coming?" and an anxious voice would answer from below, "Not yet. Hurry up and go to sleep. I want my turn." At last Billy began to snore, and then Tommy felt so lonely he couldn't bear it. So he climbed to a lower branch and sat nodding and trying to keep watch, till he too fell fast asleep, and the early moon saw the poor boys roosting there like two little owls. A loud cry, a scrambling overhead, and then a great shaking and howling waked Tommy so suddenly that he lost his wits for a moment and did not know where he was. "The bear! The bear! Don't let him get me! Tommy! Tommy, come and make him let go!" cried Billy, filling the quiet night with dismal howls. Tommy looked up, expecting to behold a large bear eating his unhappy friend, but the moonlight showed him nothing but poor Billy dangling from a bough high above the ground, caught by his belt when he fell. He'd been dreaming of bears and rolled off his perch, so there he hung, kicking and wailing, half awake, and so scared it was long before Tommy could make him believe that he was quite safe. How to get him down was the next question. The branch was not strong enough to bear Tommy, though he climbed up and tried to unhook poor Billy. The belt was firmly twisted at the back, and Billy could not reach to undo it, nor could he get his legs round the branch to pull himself up. There seemed no way but to unbuckle the belt and drop. But he was afraid to try, for the ground was hard and the fall a high one. Fortunately, both belt and buckle were strong, so he hung safely, though very uncomfortably, while Tommy racked his boyish brain to find a way to help him. Billy had just declared that he should be cut in two very soon if something was not done for him, and Tommy was in despair when they thought they heard a far-off shout, and both answered it till their throats were nearly split with screaming. "I seem to see a light moving round down that way," cried Billy from his hook, pointing toward the valley. "They're looking for us, but they won't hear us. I'll run and holler louder and bring 'em up here," answered Tommy, glad to do anything that would put an end to this dreadful state of things. "Don't leave me. I may fall and be killed. The bear might come. Don't go, don't go," wailed Billy, longing to drop, but afraid. "I won't go far, and I'll come back as quick as I can. You're safe up there. Hold on, and we'll soon get you down," answered Tommy, rushing away helter-skelter, never minding where he went, and too much excited to care for any damage. The moon was bright on the blasted trees, but when he came down among the green pines it grew dark, and he often stumbled and fell. Never minding bumps and bruises, he scrambled over rocks, leaped fallen trunks, floundered through brooks, and climbed down steep places, till with a reckless jump he went heels over head into a deep hole, and lay there for a moment stunned by the fall. It was an old bear trap, long unused, and fortunately well carpeted with dead leaves, or poor Tommy would have broken his bones. When he came to himself he was so used up that he lay still for some time in a sort of daze, too tired to know or care about anything, only dimly conscious that somebody was lost in a tree or a well, and that, on the whole, running away was not all fun. By and by the sound of a gun roused him, and remembering poor Billy, he tried to get out of the pit, for the moon showed him where he was. But it was too deep, and he was too stiff with weariness and the fall to be very nimble. So he shouted and whistled and raged about very like a little bear caught in the pit. It's very difficult to find a lost person on these great mountains, and many wander for hours not far from help, bewildered by the thick woods, the deep ravines and precipices which shut them in. Some have lost their lives, and as Tommy lay on the leaves used up by his various struggles, he thought of all the stories he'd lately heard at the farm, and began to wonder how it would feel to starve to death down there, and to wish poor Billy would come to share his prison, that they might die together like the babes in the wood, or better still, the Boy Scouts lost on the prairies in that thrilling story, Bill Boomerang, the Wild Hunter of the West. "I guess Mother's worried this time, 'cause I never stayed out all night before, and I never will again without leave. It's rather good fun, though, if they only find me. I ain't afraid, and it isn't very cold. I always wanted to sleep out, and now I'm doing it. I wish poor Billy was safely down here and in this good bed with me. Won't he be scared all alone there? Maybe the belt will break, and he'll get hurt bumping down. Sorry now I left him, he's such a fraid cat. There's the gun again. Guess it's that man after us. Hi! Hello! Here I am! Whoop! Hurrah! Hi! 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 Tommy's meditations ended in a series of yells as loud as his shrill little voice could make them, and he thought someone answered. But it must have been an echo, for no one came, and after another rampage round his prison, the poor boy nestled down among the leaves and went fast asleep because there was nothing else to do. So there they were, the two young hunters, lost at midnight on the mountain, one hanging like an apple on the old tree, and the other sound asleep in a bear pit. Their distracted mothers, meantime, were weeping and wringing their hands at the farm, while all the men in the neighborhood were out looking for the lost boys. The hunter, on his return to the hotel, had reported meeting the runaways and his effort to send them home in good season, so people knew where to look, and led by the man and dog up the mountain went Mr. Mullen with his troop. 'Twas a mild night, and the moon shone high and clear, so the hunt was on the whole rather easy and pleasant at first, and lanterns flashed through the dark forest like fireflies. The lonely cliffs seemed alive with men, and voices echoed in places where usually only the brooks babbled and the hawks screamed. But as time went on and no sign of the boys appeared, the men grew anxious and began to fear some serious harm had come to the runaways. "I can't go home without them little shavers, no way, especially Tommy," said Mr. Mullen as they stopped to rest after a hard climb through the blasted grove. "He's a boy after my own heart, spry as a chipmunk, smart as a young cockerel, and as full of mischief as a monkey. He ain't afraid of anything, and I shouldn't be a mite surprised to find him enjoying himself first rate and as cool as a cucumber. The fat boy won't take it so easily, I fancy. If it hadn't been for him, I'd have kept the lively fellow with me and shown him how to hunt. Sorry now I didn't take 'em both home," said the man with the gun, seeing his mistake too late, as people often do. "Maybe they fell down a precipice and got killed, like Moses Warner when he was lost," suggested a tall fellow who had shouted himself hoarse. "Hush up and come on. The dog is barking yonder, and he may have found him," said the farmer, hurrying toward the place where the hound was baying at something in a tree. It was poor Billy, hanging there still, half unconscious with weariness and fear. The belt had slipped up under his arms so he could breathe easily, and there he was, looking like a queer sort of cone on the blasted pine. "Well, I never!" exclaimed the farmer as the tall lad climbed up and, unhooking Billy, handed him down like a young bird into the arms held up to catch him. "He's all right, only scared out of his wits. Come along and look for the other one. I'll warrant Hugh went for help, and maybe halfway home by this time," said the hunter, who didn't take much interest in the fat boy. Tommy's hat lay on the ground, and showing it to the dog, his master told him to find the boy. The good hound sniffed about and then set off with his nose to the ground, following the zigzag track Tommy had taken in his hurry. The hunter and several of the men went after him, leaving the farmer with the others to take care of Billy. Presently the dog came to the bear pit and began to bark again. "He's got him!" cried the men, much relieved, and rushing on, soon saw the good beast looking down at a little white object in one corner of the dark hole. It was Tommy's face in the moonlight, for the rest of him was covered up with leaves. The little round face seemed very quiet, and for a moment the men stood quite still, fearing that the fall might have done the boy some harm. Then the hunter leaped down and gently touched the brown cheek. It was warm, and a soft snore from the pug nose made the man call out, much relieved, "He's all right. Wake up here, little chap, you're wanted at home. Had hunting enough for this time?" As he spoke, Tommy opened his eyes, gave a stretch, and said, "Hullo, Billy," as calmly as if in his own bed at home. Then the rustle of the leaves, the moonlight in his face, and the sight of several men staring down at him startled him wide awake. "Did you shoot the big bear?" he asked, looking up at the hunter with a grin. "No, but I caught a little one, and here he is," answered the man, giving Tommy a roll in the leaves, much pleased because he did not whine or make a fuss. "Got lost, didn't we? Oh, I say, where's Billy? I left him up a tree like a coon, and he wouldn't come down," laughed Tommy, kicking off his brown bedclothes, and quite ready to get up now. They all laughed with him, and presently, when the story was told, they pulled the boy out of the pit and went back to join the other wanderer, who was now sitting up eating the bread and butter Mrs. Mullen sent for their very late supper. The men roared again as the two boys told their various tribulations, and when they'd been refreshed, the party started for home, blowing the tin horns and firing shot after shot to let the scattered searchers know that the lost children were found. Billy was very quiet and gladly rode on the various broad backs offered for his use, but Tommy stoutly refused to be carried, and with an occasional boost over a very rough place, walked all the way down on his own sturdy legs. He was the hero of the adventure, and was never tired of relating how he caught the woodchuck, cooked the fish, slid down the big rock, and went to bed in the old bear pit. But in his own little mind he resolved to wait till he was older before he tried to be a hunter, and though he caught several woodchucks that summer, he never shot another harmless little bird.
Rosy was a nice little girl who lived with her mother in a small house in the woods. They were very poor, for the father had gone away to dig gold and did not come back, so they had to work hard to get food to eat and clothes to wear. The mother spun yarn when she was able, for she was often sick, and Rosy did all she could to help. She milked the red cow and fed the hens, dug the garden, and went to town to sell the yarn and the eggs. She was very good and sweet, and everyone loved her, but the neighbors were all poor and could do little to help the child. So, when at last the mother died, the cow and hens and house had to be sold to pay the doctor and the debts. Then Rosy was left all alone, with no mother, no home, and no money to buy clothes and dinners with. "What will you do?" said the people, who were very sorry for her. "I will go and find my father," answered Rosy bravely. "But he is far away, and you don't know just where he is, up among the mountains. Stay with us and spin on your little wheel, and we will buy the yarn and take care of you, dear little girl," said the kind people. "No, I must go, for mother told me to, and my father will be glad to have me. I'm not afraid, for everyone is good to me," said Rosy gratefully. Then the people gave her a warm red cloak, and a basket with a little loaf and bottle of milk in it, and some pennies to buy more to eat when the bread was gone. They all kissed her and wished her good luck, and she trotted away through the wood to find her father. For some days she got on very well, for the woodcutters were kind, and let her sleep in their huts, and gave her things to eat. But by and by she came to lonely places, where there were no houses, and then she was afraid, and used to climb up in the trees to sleep, and had to eat berries and leaves, like the children in the wood. She made a fire at night, so wild beasts would not come near her, and if she met other travelers, she was so young and innocent, no one had the heart to hurt her. She was kind to everything she met, so all little creatures were friends to her, as we shall see. One day, as she was resting by a river, she saw a tiny fish on the bank, nearly dead for want of water. "Poor thing! Go and be happy again," she said, softly taking him up and dropping him into the nice, cool river. "Thank you, dear child. I'll not forget, but will help you some day," said the fish, when he had taken a good drink and felt better. "Why, how can a tiny fish help such a great girl as I am?" laughed Rosy. "Wait and see," answered the fish, and he swam away with a flap of his little tail. Rosy went on her way and forgot all about it, but she never forgot to be kind, and soon after, as she was looking in the grass for strawberries, she found a field mouse with a broken leg. "Help me to my nest, or my babies will starve!" cried the poor thing. "Yes, I will, and bring these berries so that you can keep still till your leg is better, and have something to eat." Rosy took the mouse carefully in her little hand, and tied up the broken leg with a leaf of spearmint and a blade of grass. Then she carried her to the nest under the roots of an old tree, where 4 baby mice were squeaking sadly for their mother. She made a bed of thistledown for the sick mouse, and put close within reach all the berries and seeds she could find, and brought an acorn cup of water from the spring, so they could be comfortable. "Good little Rosy, I shall pay you for all this kindness some day," said the mouse when she was done. "I'm afraid you're not big enough to do much," answered Rosy as she ran off to go on her journey. "Wait and see," called the mouse, and all the little ones squeaked, as if they said the same. Some time after, as Rosy lay up in a tree, waiting for the sun to rise, she heard a great buzzing close by, and saw a fly caught in a cobweb that went from one twig to another. The big spider was trying to spin him all up, and the poor fly was struggling to get away before his legs and wings were helpless. Rosy put up her finger and pulled down the web, and the spider ran away at once to hide under the leaves. But the happy fly sat on Rosy's hand, cleaning his wings and buzzing so loud for joy that it sounded like a little trumpet. "You've saved my life, and I'll save yours if I can," said the fly, twinkling his bright eye at Rosy. "You silly thing, you can't help me," answered Rosy, climbing down, while the fly buzzed away, saying, like the mouse and fish, "Wait and see, wait and see." Rosy trudged on, till at last she came to the sea. The mountains were on the other side, but how could she get over the wide water? No ships were there, and she had no money to hire one if there had been any. So she sat on the shore, very tired and sad, and cried a few big tears as salt as the sea. "Hello!" called a bubbly sort of voice close by, and the fish popped up his head. Rosy ran to see what he wanted. "I've come to help you over the water," said the fish. "How can you, when I want a ship and someone to show me the way?" answered Rosy. "I shall just call my friend the whale, and he will take you over better than a ship, because he won't get wrecked. Don't mind if he spouts and flounces about a good deal, he's only playing, so you needn't be frightened." Down dived the little fish, and Rosy waited to see what would happen, for she didn't believe such a tiny thing could really bring a whale to help her. Presently what looked like a small island came floating through the sea, and turning round, so that its tail touched the shore, the whale said in a roaring voice that made her jump, "Come aboard, little girl, and hold on tight. I'll carry you wherever you like." It was rather a slippery bridge, and Rosy was rather scared at this big, strange boat, but she got safely over and held on fast. Then, with a roll and a plunge, off went the whale, spouting 2 fountains, while his tail steered him like the rudder of a ship. Rosy liked it, and looked down into the deep sea, where all sorts of queer and lovely things were to be seen. Great fishes came and looked at her, dolphins played near to amuse her, the pretty Nautilus sailed by in its transparent boat, and porpoises made her laugh with their rough play. Mermaids brought her pearls and red coral to wear, sea apples to eat, and at night sung her to sleep with their sweet lullabies. So she had a very pleasant voyage, and ran on shore with many thanks to the good whale, who gave a splendid spout and swam away. Then Rosy traveled along till she came to a desert, hundreds of miles of hot sand, with no trees or brooks or houses. "I never can go that way," she said. "I should starve, and soon be worn out walking in that hot sand. What shall I do?" "Quee, quee, wait and see. You were good to me, so here I come from my little home to help you willingly," said a friendly voice, and there was the mouse, looking at her with its bright eyes full of gratitude. "Why, you dear little thing, I'm very glad to see you, but I'm sure you can't help me across this desert," said Rosy, stroking its soft back. "That's easy enough," answered the mouse, rubbing its paws briskly. "I'll just call my friend the lion. He lives here, and he'll take you across with pleasure." "Oh, I'm afraid he'd rather eat me. How dare you call that fierce beast?" cried Rosy, much surprised. "I knocked him out of a net once, and he promised to help me. He is a noble animal, and he will keep his word." Then the mouse sang in its shrill little voice, "O lion grand, come over the sand, and help me now, I pray. Here's a little lass who wants to pass. Please carry her on her way." In a moment a loud roar was heard, and a splendid yellow lion, with fiery eyes and a long mane, came bounding over the sand to meet them. "What can I do for you, tiny friend?" he said, looking at the mouse, who was not a bit frightened, though Rosy hid behind a rock, expecting every moment to be eaten. Mousie told him, and the good lion said pleasantly, "I'll take the child along. Come on, my dear, sit on my back, and hold fast to my mane, for I'm a swift horse, and you might fall off." Then he crouched down like a great cat, and Rosy climbed up, for he was so kind she could not fear him. And away they went, racing over the sand till her hair whistled in the wind. As soon as she got her breath, she thought it great fun to go flying along, while other lions and tigers rolled their fierce eyes at her, but dared not touch her, for this lion was king of all, and she was quite safe. they met a train of camels with loads on their backs, and the people traveling with them wondered what a queer thing was riding that fine lion. It looked like a very large monkey in a red coat, but went so fast that they never saw that it was a little girl. "How glad I am that I was kind to the mouse, for if the good little creature had not helped me, I never could have crossed this desert," said Rosy, as the lion walked a while to rest himself. "And if the mouse had not gnawed me out of the net, I never should have come at her call. You see, little people can conquer big ones, and make them gentle and friendly by kindness," answered the lion. Then away they went again, faster than ever, till they came to the green country. Rosy thanked the good beast, and he ran back, for if anyone saw him, they would try to catch him. "Now I have only to climb up these mountains and find father," thought Rosy, as she saw the great hills before her, with many steep roads winding up to the top, and far, far away rose the smoke from the huts where the men lived and dug for gold. She started off bravely, but took the wrong road, and after climbing a long while found the path ended in rocks over which she could not go. She was very tired and hungry, for her food was gone, and there were no houses in this wild place. Night was coming on, and it was so cold she was afraid she would freeze before morning, but dared not go on lest she should fall down some steep hole and be killed. Much discouraged, she lay down on the moss and cried a little. Then she tried to sleep, but something kept buzzing in her ear, and looking carefully she saw a fly prancing about on the moss, as if anxious to make her listen to his song. "Rosy, my dear, don't cry, I'm here, to help you all I can. I'm only a fly, but you'll see that I will keep my word like a man." Rosy couldn't help laughing to hear the brisk little fellow talk as if he could do great things, but she was very glad to see him and hear his cheerful song, so she held out her finger, and while he sat there told him all her troubles. "Bless your heart, my friend the eagle will carry you right up the mountains and leave you at your father's door," cried the fly, and he was off with a flirt of his gauzy wings, for he meant what he said. Rosy was ready for her new horse, and not at all afraid after the whale and the lion, so when a great eagle swooped down and alighted near her, she just looked at his sharp claws, big eyes, and crooked beak as coolly as if he had been a cock-robin. He liked her courage and said kindly in his rough voice, "Hop up, little girl, and sit among my feathers. Hold me fast round the neck, or you may grow dizzy and get a fall." Rosy nestled down among the thick gray feathers, and put both arms around his neck, and whiz they went, up, 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 higher and higher, till the trees looked like grass, they were so far below. At first it was very cold, and Rosy cuddled deeper into her feather bed. Then, as they came nearer to the sun, it grew warm, and she peeped out to see the huts standing in a green spot on the top of the mountain. "Here we are. You'll find all the men are down in the mine at this time. They won't come up till morning, so you will have to wait for your father. Goodbye, good luck, my dear." And the eagle soared away, higher still, to his nest among the clouds. It was night now, but fires were burning in all the houses, so Rosy went from hut to hut, trying to find her father's, that she might rest while she waited. At last, in one, the picture of a pretty little girl hung on the wall, and under it was written, "My Rosy." Then she knew that this was the right place, and she ate some supper, put on more wood, and went to bed, for she wanted to be fresh when her father came in the morning. While she slept, a storm came on. Thunder rolled and lightning flashed, the wind blew a gale, and rain poured, but Rosy never waked till dawn, when she heard men shouting outside. "Run! Run! The river is rising! We shall all be drowned!" Rosy ran out to see what was the matter, though the wind nearly blew her away. She found that so much rain had made the river overflow till it began to wash the banks away. "What shall I do? What shall I do?" cried Rosy, watching the men rush about like ants, getting their bags of gold ready to carry off before the water swept them away, if it became a flood. As if in answer to her cry, Rosy heard a voice say close by, "Splash, dash, rumble, and crash, here come the beavers gay. See what they do, Rosy, for you, because you helped me one day." And there in the water was the little fish swimming about, while an army of beavers began to pile up earth and stones in a high bank to keep the river back. How they worked, digging and heaping with teeth and claws, and beating the earth hard with their queer tails like shovels. Rosy and the men watched them work, glad to be safe while the storm cleared up. And by the time the dam was made, all danger was over. Rosy looked into the faces of the rough men, hoping her father was there, and was just going to ask about him when a great shouting rose again, and all began to run to the pit hole, saying, "The sand has fallen in! The poor fellows will be smothered! How can we get them out? How can we get them out?" Rosy ran too, feeling as if her heart would break, for her father was down in the mine, and would die soon if air did not come to him. The men dug as hard as they could, but it was a long job, and they feared they would not be in time. Suddenly, hundreds of moles came scampering along, and began to burrow down through the earth, making many holes for air to go in, for they knew how to build galleries through the ground better than men can. Everyone was so surprised they stopped to look on, for the dirt flew like rain as the busy little fellows scratched and bored as if making an underground railway. "What does it mean?" said the men. "They work faster than we can, and better. But who sent them? Is this strange little girl a fairy?" Before Rosy could speak, all heard a shrill small voice singing, "They come at my call, and though they are small, they'll dig the passage clear. I never forget, we'll save them yet, for love of Rosy dear." Then all saw a little gray mouse sitting on a stone, waving her tail about and pointing with her tiny paw to show the moles where to dig. The men laughed, and Rosy was telling them who she was, when a cry came from the pit, and they saw that the way was clear, so they could pull the buried men up. In a minute they got ropes, and soon had 10 poor fellows safe on the ground, pale and dirty, but all alive, and all shouting as if they were crazy. "Tom's got it! Tom's got it! Hooray for Tom!" "What is it?" cried the others, and then they saw Tom come up with the biggest lump of gold ever found in the mountains. Everyone was glad of Tom's luck, for he was a good man, and had worked a long time, and been sick, and couldn't go back to his wife and child. When he saw Rosy, he dropped the lump, and caught her up, saying, "My little girl! She's better than 1,000,000 pounds of gold!" Then Rosy was very happy, and went back to the hut, and had a lovely time telling her father all about her troubles and her travels. He cried when he heard that the poor mother was dead before she could have any of the good things the gold would buy them. "We will go away and be happy together in the pleasantest home I can find, and never part any more, my darling," said the father, kissing Rosy as she sat on his knee with her arms round his neck. She was just going to say something very sweet to comfort him, when a fly lit on her arm and buzzed very loud. "Don't drive me away, but hear what I say. Bad men want the gold. They will steal it tonight, and you must take flight, so be quiet and busy and bold." "I was afraid someone would take my lump away. I'll pack up at once, and we will creep off while the men are busy at work, though I'm afraid we can't go fast enough to be safe, if they miss us and come after," said Tom, bundling his gold into a bag and looking very sober, for some of the miners were wild fellows, and might kill him for the sake of that great lump. But the fly sang again, "Slip away with me, and you will see what a wise little thing am I. For the road I show no man can know, since it's up in the pathless sky." Then they followed Buzz to a quiet nook in the wood, and there were the eagle and his mate waiting to fly away with them so fast and so far that no one could follow. Rosy and the bag of gold were put on the mother eagle. Tom sat astride the kingbird, and away they flew to a great city, where the little girl and her father lived happily together all their lives.
Old longing's nomadic leap, chafing at custom's chain, again from its brumal sleep wakens the ferile strain. Buck did not read the newspapers, or he would have known that trouble was brewing, not alone for himself, But for every Tidewater dog strong of muscle and with warm, long hair, from Puget Sound to San Diego. Because men, groping in the Arctic darkness, had found a yellow metal. And because steamship and transportation companies were booming the find, thousands of men were rushing into the Northland. These men wanted dogs. And the dogs they wanted were heavy dogs, with strong muscles by which to toil and furry coats to protect them from the frost. Buck lived at a big house in the sun-kissed Santa Clara Valley. Judge Miller's place, it was called. It stood back from the road, half hidden among the trees, through which glimpses could be caught of the wide, cool veranda that ran around its four sides. The house was approached by graveled driveways which wound about through wide-spreading lawns and under the interlacing boughs of tall poplars. But Buck was neither house dog nor kennel dog. The whole realm was his. He plunged into the swimming tank or went hunting with the judge's sons. He escorted Molly and Alice, the judge's daughters, on long twilight or early morning rambles. On wintry nights he lay at the judge's feet before the roaring library fire. He carried the judge's grandsons on his back, or rolled them in the grass and guarded their footsteps through wild adventures down to the fountain in the stable yard and even beyond, where the paddocks were and the berry patches. Among the terriers he stalked imperiously, and Toots and Isabel he utterly ignored, for he was king over all creeping, crawling, flying things of Judge Miller's place, humans included. His father, Elmo, a huge St. Bernard, had been the judge's inseparable companion, and Buck bid fair to follow in the way of his father. He was not so large, he weighed only 140 pounds, for his mother, Shep, had been a Scotch shepherd dog. Nevertheless, 140 pounds, to which was added the dignity that comes of good living and universal respect, enabled him to carry himself in right royal fashion. During the 4 years since his puppyhood, he had lived the life of a sated aristocrat. He had a fine pride in himself, was even a trifle egotistical, as country gentlemen sometimes become because of their insular situation, but he had saved himself by not becoming a mere pampered house dog. Hunting and kindred outdoor delights had kept down the fat and hardened his muscles, and to him, as to the cold-tubbing races, the love of water had been a tonic and a health preserver. And this was the manner of Dog Buck in the fall of 1897, when the Klondike strike dragged men from all the world into the frozen north. But Buck did not read the newspapers, and he did not know that Manuel, one of the gardener's helpers, was an undesirable acquaintance. Manuel had one besetting sin. He loved to play Chinese lottery. Also, in his gambling, he had one besetting weakness, faith in a system, and this made his damnation certain. For to play a system requires money, while the wages of a gardener's helper do not lap over the needs of a wife and numerous progeny. The judge was at a meeting of the Raising Growers Association, and the boys were busy organizing an athletic club on the memorable night of Manuel's treachery. No one saw him and Buck go off through the orchard on what Buck imagined was merely a stroll. And with the exception of a solitary man, no one saw them arrive at the little flag station known as College Park. This man talked with Manuel, and money chinked between them. "You might wrap up the goods before you deliver 'em," the stranger said gruffly, and Manuel doubled a piece of stout rope around Buck's neck under the collar. "Twist it, and you'll choke 'em plenty," said Manuel, and the stranger grunted a ready affirmative. Buck had accepted the rope with quiet dignity. To be sure, it was an unwanted performance, but he had learned to trust in men he knew and to give them credit for a wisdom that outreached his own. But when the ends of the rope were placed in the stranger's hands, he growled menacingly. He had merely intimated his displeasure, in his pride believing that to intimate was to command. But to his surprise, the rope tightened around his neck, shutting off his breath. In quick rage, he sprang at the man, who met him halfway, grappled him close by the throat, and with a deft twist threw him over on his back. Then the rope tightened mercilessly, while Buck struggled in a fury, his tongue lolling out of his mouth and his great chest panting futilely. Never in all his life had he been so vilely treated, and never in all his life had he been so angry. But his strength ebbed, his eyes glazed, and he knew nothing when the train was flagged and the two men threw him into the baggage car. The next he knew, he was dimly aware that his tongue was hurting and that he was being jolted along in some sort of a conveyance. The hoarse shriek of a locomotive whistling a crossing told him where he was. He had traveled too often with the judge not to know the sensation of riding in a baggage car. He opened his eyes, and into them came the unbridled anger of a kidnapped king. The man sprang for his throat, but Buck was too quick for him. His jaws closed on the hand, nor did they relax till his senses were choked out of him once more. "Yep, as fits," the man said, hiding his mangled hand from the baggage man, who had been attracted by the sounds of a struggle. "I'm taking him up for the boss to Frisco. A crack dog doctor there thinks he can cure him." Concerning that night's ride, the man spoke most eloquently for himself in a little shed back of a saloon on the San Francisco waterfront. "All I get is $50 for it," he grumbled, "and I wouldn't do it over for 1,000 cold cash." His hand was wrapped in a bloody handkerchief, and the right trouser leg was ripped from knee to ankle. "How much did the other mug get?" the saloon keeper demanded. "100, was the reply. "Wouldn't take a sou less, so help me." "That makes 150, the saloon keeper calculated. "And he's worth it, or I'm a squarehead." The kidnapper undid the bloody wrappings and looked at his lacerated hand. "If I don't get the hydrophoby, it'll be because you was born to hang," laughed the saloon keeper. "Here, lend me a hand before you pull your freight," he added. Dazed, suffering intolerable pain from throat and tongue, with the life half throttled out of him, Buck attempted to face his tormentors. But he was thrown down and choked repeatedly till they succeeded in filing the heavy brass collar from off his neck. Then the rope was removed, and he was flung into a cage-like crate. There he lay for the remainder of the weary night, nursing his wrath and wounded pride. He could not understand what it all meant. What did they want with him, these strange men? Why were they keeping him pent up in this narrow crate? He did not know why, but he felt oppressed by the vague sense of impending calamity. Several times during the night he sprang to his feet when the shed door rattled open, expecting to see the judge or the boys at least. But each time it was the bulging face of the saloon keeper that peered in at him by the sickly light of a tallow candle. And each time the joyful bark that trembled in Buck's throat was twisted into a savage growl. But the saloon keeper let him alone, and in the morning 4 men entered and picked up the crate. More tormentors, Buck decided, for they were evil-looking creatures, ragged and unkempt, and he stormed and raged at them through the bars. They only laughed and poked sticks at him, which he promptly assailed with his teeth till he realized that that was what they wanted. Whereupon he lay down sullenly and allowed the crate to be lifted into a wagon. Then he and the crate in which he was imprisoned began a passage through many hands. Clerks in the express office took charge of him. He was carted about in another wagon. A truck carried him with an assortment of boxes and parcels upon a ferry steamer. He was trucked off the steamer into a great railway depot, and finally he was deposited in an express car. For 2 days and nights, this express car was dragged along at the tail of shrieking locomotives, and for 2 days and nights Buck neither ate nor drank. In his anger he had met the first advances of the express messengers with growls, and they had retaliated by teasing him. When he flung himself against the bars, quivering and frothing, they laughed at him and taunted him. They growled and barked like detestable dogs, mewed and flapped their arms and crowed. It was all very silly, he knew, but therefore the more outrage to his dignity, and his anger waxed